Hi, this is Desiree Bradvika and Sun Lu. Say hi, Sun.
Hi.
And we're here to talk about Day at a Glance, possibly with the new time allotments for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Now, the example that we have is a 6th grade example, but Sun, I think it would be very similar for 7th and 8th. What do you think?
Yes, because you have different periods. So period 1 is reading, period 2 is language, and so on.
So if your site doesn't departmentalize for 6th grade, you may want to look at the video for grades 4 and 5 possibly, but from what we understand, most 6th, 7th, and 8ths are departmentalized. So let's look at a possibility of the day. So according to Janet's time allotments, there is now 50 minutes for reading, and that reading is done in homeroom. So the lesson here that Sun and I have is from Out of the Dust. That's part of the unit that we shared with you on our day 3 together. Now for the English-only students, we're focusing on a language standard, distinguishing between literal and figurative language and inferring its meaning. Now that's very much like what I demonstrated when we were together for day 3. During reading, there is integrated ELD time, and Sun will talk about that.
So do you remember my little YouTube video where I pulled aside a small group of emerging, expanding, and bridging students, and I worked on pretty much the same language standard, but I made it more accessible for ELs, and this time I used the interpretive standard from part 1 of the ELD standards, and I used that for the ELD time with a small group, about 10 to 15 minutes.
So Sun, maybe when the EOs are working with partners and finding the figurative language in the text and talking about what they thought it meant, that might be the time where you pull that small group for integrated ELD?
Perfect time to pull a small group for scaffolded instruction.
Okay. Then we move into the language designated portion of the day, and hopefully it looks like Writer's Workshop as the structure. Now this is the designated ELD portion of the day. My EOs have a mini lesson on using words, phrases, and clauses to clarify relationships among claim and reason. That's directly from the Common Core writing standards. So hopefully this looks like Writer's Workshop. I give a short mini lesson, 15 minutes at the most. Students go out to work independently on their argument writing, possibly in 3rd trimester, and during that independent time is when designated ELD will take place.
So you have a lot of students working on their independent writing. They may be also conferring with their peers, but this is a perfect time to pull aside a group for designated ELD time. Ideally, if you had 3 teachers in your grade level of 6th grade, you would designate 1 teacher to work with the emerging students, 1 teacher to work with the expanding, and 1 with the bridging, so that you have leveled ELD groups. And then with these leveled ELD groups, you can set different expectations and have these students also generate different levels of product.
And Sun, these aren't homogeneous groups, if I'm correct, because there are EOs
mixed within them. Yeah, It would be impossible if you just had one small group and one person would take all the EOs. No, it has to be EOs and RFEPs and IFEPs, of course. So you have a mix of a whole class of EOs with the small group of emerging students, a whole class of EOs, IFEPs, and RFEPs with another group of expanding, and a whole group of EOs with the bridging students.
Now, I know it's tricky, Sun, when we think about teaching writing and teaching ELD. A lot of us had ELD as a pull-out or very different program-based, possibly. Can you talk a little bit about this new area in the framework that says that during content time, like writing, how to do that designated ELD instruction?
Well, designated ELD time is a perfect time to work on part 2 of the ELD standards. Remember, there are 3 parts of the ELD standards. The first part focus on collaborative, interpretive, and productive, which is what we went over during our last CCSS day. And then the second part of the standards is focusing on language. And since language is the time that you're working on right now, it's also the perfect time to work on this part of the standards. And the last part is just foundational skills, but by this time, foundational skills are more related to just getting students to be used to the way English language is set up. So there are some suggestions in the foundational part. Actually, designated ELD is a perfect time to work on the language and some of the foundational skills, since we don't really address foundational skills with the 6th grade, but foundational skills and the second part, which is about language, perfect time is during language time.
So, from what I'm understanding, as the homeroom teacher, I'm really thinking about the goal of the time, what I want students to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And here, this is really an interpretive learning,
Mm-hmm.
inferring meaning from figurative language. So I'm doing the scaffolding for my ELs that they need in order to accomplish this learning. And it's the same here. I want students to use words, phrases, and clauses. So I'm helping support and scaffold my ELs in that same kind of thinking. Is that
Yes.
true?
So you're working with writing here. You're also working with using these words in writing. So definitely your ELD designated group time will always be related to what everyone else is learning. It's the
Okay.
ideal way to set up ELD time.
And that helps me just structure my day, think about my planning, that it's all related. It's not really separate, discrete bits of information I'm trying to
Yes.
give everybody. Okay. So then there's a time for social studies during the day. And here we were thinking about that out of the dust unit again by trying to tie the social studies standards around migration of a certain people, because this idea fits into this same big idea that out of the dust was used to demonstrate. And my English only students are really thinking about the Jews' migration, their conflict with the Romans, and just that whole idea of this culture and the conflicts that they had during that time. This is also another time in the day when I'm going to scaffold my English learners, and Son's going to talk about integrated ELD with social studies.
Now we're going back to part 1 of the ELD standards, where we're having students collaborate to exchange information and ideas, answering yes or no and WH questions, which is what, where, when, and why. So that's the integrated ELD part. Of course, it's also related to the main lesson about the Jews in the Mediterranean region, and we're working with the collaborative standards, having the students engage in a lot of conversation and working with each other, working with other EOs, but you can also pull a small group aside to help them develop their academic vocabulary, specifically Tier 3 words in the social studies time.
So, Son, is this the time when it helps for me to think about a content objective and a language objective?
Yes, definitely. Think about the language objective that will help them access the content. Maybe for history, it might be the understanding. Did I say content or language? I meant to say language objective that will help them access the content. For example, maybe there might be some sequence words that are important, so that could be the language objectives. The language objective is to understand the use of transitional words, and the other objectives, the content objectives, can be Jews in the Mediterranean, but the language objectives are understanding transitional words in order to understand how history unfolds.
And teachers are probably doing that, maybe not as intentionally as we'd like to do it next year.
Subconsciously.
Yeah, because we usually have students read social studies, interpret social studies, produce some kind of artifact that's written or spoken about social studies learning. So it's probably not as different as maybe it sounds like it is. Okay. So there's a time in the day for math, and there's also a time in the day for science. So we will move the slide down. Scratch that. We won't go to another page. So here we're talking about the water cycle, and the phenomena of winds, ocean currents, and the sun as a source of energy for the planet. That's the content objective here. And students may do a close reading during science to help them be exposed to the academic vocabulary, background knowledge they may require for that time, and as they're learning about that content, the integrated ELD time would focus more on a language objective.
Now, for a language objective, you might focus on sequence words again, or you might also want to work on what other content objectives would work here. So once again, as related to the history lesson or the social studies lesson, you have sequence words that will play a very important role in helping the students understand science. So maybe the focus will also be on sequence words during the integrated ELD time, where you pull a small group of ELs with you to explain the process of the water cycle based on close reading with a lot of substantial support.
So, son, what might help me think about this that won't make me crazy with thinking about 8 different planning items is my integrated ELD goal may be very similar throughout the day. Maybe sequencing is something that, let's say, my expanding students still really need language for. They need the words that signal sequence. They need practice in verbalizing connected sentences in sequence. So possibly that's something I'm doing during integrated reading time, integrated science time, even integrated social studies time. Is that possible?
Yeah, if you set one language objective for the whole day, chances are they'll be more apt to understanding everything. So.
And maybe the more practice we have with connecting the day into a big idea, the more feasible that might be for me to plan my work that way.
Definitely.
Because it's not about the activities, it's about the learning that's happening for the English learner.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to just briefly. We constructed this as a PE day. We know PE does not happen every day. We know it might be a short Thursday, so the dismissal time might be off here, but there's definitely time at some time in the week for PE. There's universal access, which hopefully doesn't look as remedial next year. If students need further work in ELA, there might be a debate or a drama club or something engaging going on. Math students might be working on engineering or robotics or application of math, or possibly even our GATE students looking at project-based learning or showing application of learning in technology. But hopefully we can have fun with this time of the day.
And of course you have your Tier 2 students who are pulled out for another service. And then it's a good time to start thinking about how the ELs will be integrated in this part as well, because they could be part of a debate group. They could excel in math and be part of the robotics engineering group, and then they can also express an interest in journalism or project-based learning. So it's a good time to spread your ELs in many possible ways and cater to their interests.
And maybe even pull in something that the teacher has interest in learning about or a particular skill in too. And then your dismissal. So hopefully that clarifies some of the direction that we're going in with CCSS and Common Core and big ideas. So feel free to email any questions or clarification to either myself or Sun, and we'd be happy to talk to you further about any of the information we've shared today. Any closing words, Sun?
Okay, just AUSD.us is our address, and then you can contact us with emails, questions about any of this ELD or ELA.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.